Hey, Mel, Bri here. Gotta work from home today because the whole family caught a nasty...
Daddy!
Hey, Mikey, if you're gonna puke, find the popcorn bowl! But my availability is 110%. Coincidentally, so is my fever. Kidding. Mel, I'm so cold but hot. But I'm gonna get you that budget just as soon as... Mikey, popcorn bowl!
Press 1 to use Instacart and get your family's sick day essentials delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. Press 2 to keep working. Do not press 2. Just use Instacart, Brian.
I'm Tim Fitzgerald at GoPowerCat.com.
And I'm Scott Chasen with Fog.net.
This is a replay of WIBW's TV show, The Drive.
Here's this week's episode on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network.
Good evening, Wildcat and Jayhawk fans, and welcome to The Drive, sponsored by FlintHillsAuto.com. I am Tim Fitzgerald at GoPowerCat.com, and the man to my right is Scott Chasen of Fog.net, and he is done covering football.
Done. It's funny, I tweeted a colleague of yours, Riley Gates. We were talking about bowl games. I said, disclaimer, never actually covered a bowl game because I've covered Kansas football for the last half decade.
I've got a secret for you. Mm-hmm. Covering the NCAA tournament's more fun.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. You go to some cool places like Salt Lake.
Bowls are fun, but the tournament's really cool. You can interact with us on social media at Facebook.com/The Drive Show, on Twitter at The Drive 13, and of course answer our weekly poll question, make your game predictions at TheDriveShow.com. And remember, if you ever miss an episode of The Drive, you can listen to an audio-only version that will appear each Monday morning in the form of a podcast at GoPowerCat and Fog.net. And of course, we will start things off with our 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill is sponsored by Hula Hands. They've been expecting you. Now let's eat.
Well, K-State's regular season ended with an impressive 8-4 record following a 27-17 victory over Iowa State. How did Coach Chris Kleiman's program find that much success at Kansas State in season number 1?
That's really pretty remarkable when you think about it. This team went 5-7. The program went 5-7 a year ago and lost a lot of those players. They had a lot of injuries through the year, but the coaching staff did a really nice job of putting together the pieces and going out and finding guys like Josh Youngblood late in the recruiting process, and that freshman out of Tampa now has a nation-leading 3 kickoff returns for touchdowns. Weirdly enough, he may not be an All-American because he won't show up on any of the lists because he doesn't have enough returns to be listed on the NCAA stats. So 3 out of 13, he needs 15. It's incredible. But it was just like that. They just found guys that could rise up and play, and they overcome a number of injuries. They played just enough freshmen to get by. They had a couple grad transfers at running back, and Skylar Thompson lifted his game, but mostly you really have to kind of credit the defense that vastly improved their level of play. And it was still kind of bend but don't break. They gave up some yards through the year, but they didn't give up many points, and they were marvelous, including in Saturday's victory against Iowa State on 3rd down. They just did a lot of little things right. They weren't perfect. You wouldn't expect them to be. They lost some games you thought they would win, West Virginia most notably, but they lost, or they won some games that you didn't expect ever. Maybe Mississippi State. In hindsight, that makes more sense, but certainly Oklahoma. They just found a way to get it done when they needed to get it done, and that included Saturday's game in which they was tied at 17, and K-State scored the last 13 points of that game to end up winning 27-17, and ran the ball really well and played incredible defense in the 4th quarter.
If anyone ever questions how much coaching can elevate a program, I mean, you've seen it. I'm not saying Bill Snyder was a bad coach by any means, but I mean, this team was picked ninth in the conference, and to do what they did, I think it's absolutely remarkable. I mean, K-State had a great season by really the standard of any year, again, let alone a year they were picked 9th in the conference.
Yeah, it is very impressive what Chris Kleiman and company did with this group. You know, you look at it, they could have won 10, they could have won 6, they ended up right in the middle, and probably exceeded most people's, well, everyone's reasonable expectations for K-State football. KU's football season ended with a crushing loss to Baylor. It was just 61-6. Scott, this KU season was a roller coaster. Can you put it into perspective?
Well, at times, lots of progress that was evident, offensively, defensively, maybe even special teams, and then at times the team looked the exact opposite way. I mean, I don't think you can sum up the season any better than going back-to-back weeks. In week 2, Coastal Carolina, a 12-7 loss that has everyone scratching their head saying, how does this offense only put up 7 points, and wondering, will this be a one-win team? Then the next week you go on the road against Boston College, and it's a classic, Les Miles win where it doesn't necessarily take the path you expect. I think someone said every Les Miles win is like solving a maze. I would agree with that one. And you win 48-24 in a game that no one has you being in. Now, the Baylor game was, absolutely lopsided. The Jayhawks were dominated from the onset, offense, defense, special teams. I actually do my grades for Fog.net on our 24/7 Sports Network, and F was the grade pretty much across the board and pretty much deserved. Carter Stanley threw 3 interceptions and then actually pulled himself. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. The defense gave up, I believe, a 4-play, 74-yard touchdown drive to start the game. On the second drive, 1 play, 51 yards, so it didn't get much better. And special teams twice handed the ball away on punt returns. One time when a player was setting up Kwame Lassiter to block on the return, accidentally touched it. Another time when the punt returner just muffed, Kenny Logan just muffed the catch that was a little bit over his head. But again, I think there were definite signs of progress. I think at times this KU team looked better than anyone would have thought. You found a little bit of stability at the quarterback spot, and you have some coaches that maybe you feel a little bit better about, some of the position coaches that maybe you did in years past. You look at a guy like Emmett Jones, what he's done on the recruiting circuit, I think that's a big deal for KU, and I think KU has a chance to add a lot of names in the early signing period. So I think overall steps in the right direction. Wasn't as good as it could have been. Definitely a couple games that got away from KU. This team was pretty close to being a 5-win team, but again, I think generally the sense is progress and movement in a positive direction.
I think so. I think this is a better football team than it was at the end of last season, and we'll see if they can piece together enough recruits to get it going forward a little bit better.
Yeah, that Baylor game too was surprising just because from the onset, didn't look prepared to play, didn't look focused. Don't know what it was.
Like they were just at the end of their season and ready to be done, and Baylor needed to make a statement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of, Baylor dominated Kansas, and Oklahoma cruised to a win over Oklahoma State. So after watching 12 games of each, which do you think would fare best in the college football playoff?
I've got a plan. Go with me here, Big 12.
Oh, no.
You take the Baylor defense and the Oklahoma offense, and you put them into one team, and it's kind of, they can be crimson and green. It's kind of a holiday thing.
Yeah.
It's like a gift to college football because no team in the Big 12 is awesome this year. One might sneak into the college football playoff thanks to Alabama's loss, because I think we can all agree if they had won, they were going to put them in just because it's Alabama. But the winner of the Big 12 championship game might just sneak in, and it might just be Baylor, because we'll get to our picks a little bit later. I think Baylor is actually the better overall team, and we kind of saw that in the first meeting between these teams, and then Baylor let up off the gas. It was a kind of a rookie mistake being in that position. They just can't let that happen. This is going to be a big game. For the Big 12, I think it's best that Baylor wins, because I suspect Oklahoma will still get a college football New Year's 6 bid at that point. Baylor may not if they're the odd team out. We'll see. I don't know about you. I think Baylor will win this game.
Yeah, I've been down on Baylor for a lot of this year, and I definitely thought Oklahoma was the class of the conference as kind of the season progressed. But I think as you take in more information, you see things week to week, and certainly getting a chance to see both teams in person. Baylor obviously playing Kansas the last week of the season. It just gives you more information to build an opinion off of. And at least what I saw on Saturday, I saw legitimate speed against Baylor, or with Baylor, that looked a little bit different than when the Jayhawks played Oklahoma. And again, obviously different games, different circumstances around the game, and obviously we've seen these two teams compete, and for one half Baylor look a lot better than Oklahoma, and then for one half Oklahoma look a lot better than Baylor. I think Baylor's defense makes them a more legitimate playoff team. If they were to get into it, I would trust that defense to keep a game close more than I would have faith in Oklahoma at this point. So
that's a great point.
Yeah, defense travels, isn't that the saying?
Yeah.
And especially when it gets cold, I would take Baylor, I think, as well at this point.
Yeah, I think that defense is really good, and I had someone say, they're KU would score points. I go, no, they're not scoring points on that Baylor defense. I didn't expect Baylor to score that many points themselves, but that's just how it happened. Now, a quick look at our poll question results. And poll questions are brought to you by Film at 11, your go fast, look good, play hard custom shop.
Well, last week's question was, how will KU basketball fare at the Maui Invitational? And you see the results here. Win the event 50%, you were correct. Come in second, 25%, you were wrong, sorry. And lose before the championship game, 25%.
That's like half, and then a quarter and a quarter.
Almost like K-State fans and KU fans were
just
voting.
Voted right down the middle. Here's this week's question. Who should be named Big 12 Football Coach of the Year? Not who will be named, who should be named.
Ooh, I like the caveat.
A, Baylor's Matt Rule. B, K-State's Chris Kleiman. C, OU's Lincoln Riley, who's on there because I wanted a third option. Make your votes over at thedriveshow.com.
Who you got?
I think it'll be Rule. I think it should be Kleiman. What he did with that group, when you consider Matt Rule won one game in his first season, granted he had a mess he picked up, but it's hard to find a coach who took a non-bowl team and won 8 games the next year, and his first year as an FBS coach.
Yeah, I do think Rule will be the one to win it. I think both guys definitely have a good argument for
I don't have a vote, so what's it matter?
Yeah, well, hey, that will do it for this half of the 2-minute drill, but we will be right back with more on KU and K-State on The Drive.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage, to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify is here to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 15% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Odyssey Podcast.
Welcome back to The Drive as we continue our weekly 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill is sponsored by Hula Hands. They've been expecting you. Now, let's eat.
Kansas State headed to a bowl game again, but where? Fitz, can you offer any clarity for K-State's picture, and can you confirm or deny that you actually tried to purchase a bowl this year?
I did. It was a lovely bowl. It had flowers on it. It was really nice. The bowl situation has no clarity. Look, it all starts with the New Year's Six bowls. I mean, if the Big 12 can get 2 teams into that, maybe Oklahoma or Baylor into the playoff and someone else gets to go, say the Cotton Bowl, then that moves everyone up a spot. The pecking order for selections in the Big 12 is the Alamo Camping World in Orlando, the Texas Bowl in Houston. Alamo, by the way, is in San Antonio if you don't know your history. And then the Liberty Bowl in Memphis and the Cheez-It Bowl in Phoenix, a bowl that in various names K-State's been to a number of times. And probably the fan base is like, that's enough of that. So really, once a bowl is on the clock, they can pick any bowl-eligible team that's available out of the Big 12. So there's no rhyme or reason. If you get third, you're locked into this bowl. There's none of that. And it doesn't really matter because in terms of Big 12 standings, the other 4 eligible teams all tied for third. Now, granted, both Iowa State and Texas had a non-conference loss, so they're 7-5, while Oklahoma State and Kansas State are 8-4. It looks like it's going to come down to the Texas Bowl or Liberty Bowl for Kansas State, kind of depending on how things line up and what the committees do. And it does look like the Camping World Bowl in Orlando is going to reach down and take Texas so they can have a Notre Dame-Texas matchup, which sounds great on paper, but I don't know it will be a great game in reality. anyhow, we won't really know until the games are played next Saturday. The championship games need to be played, and then on Sunday, the playoffs will pick their four. The other bowls on New Year's Day will pick their teams, and off we go into the chaos.
It's funny to think about again, just where K-State was coming into the year, what would have been expected, even the bowl conversation. And then it's also funny you mentioned that Notre Dame-Texas Bowl. It's like the preseason darlings, the are they back or not bowl.
Yeah, and the Camping World Bowl tried to compliment Texas by saying, we don't get many shots at Texas, but they're available to us now. In other words, your season stunk. And what's weird about it is, actually, they get lots of shots at picking Texas because they're not been good for a long time. It's just kind of how it is. I don't know. Speaking of good teams, though, KU basketball had an impressive 3-0 slate in Maui. My brother and sister-in-law were there. Aloha. And should return to being ranked in the top 3 on Monday. Scott, what changed after that season opening loss to Duke?
Well, it's funny because that game will probably be most remembered for the turnovers that the Jayhawks committed. They committed 28 turnovers in that game. They came from the big men, they came from the guards, and I don't want to make it more simple than it needs to be and say, well, now Isaiah Moss is there. He's not injured. He's able to play in games. But what's funny about his performance, and this was especially true against Dayton, I believe he logged 1 shot attempt against Dayton. It was a half-court shot that would have served as like a potential buzzer beater at I think a game-winning or halftime shot. I can't remember which. But that was his only shot of the game. He led the team in plus-minus, playing 30-plus minutes. Now, that's such an interesting stat because plus-minus can be a really misleading statistic that you don't want to use. What it basically tells you is how many points your team outscored the opponent when you were on the floor. So if your plus-minus is 10, that means when you were in the game, you outscored the other team by 10 points. With Isaiah Moss, it feels like it's not a fluke, though, because he's consistently among KU's leaders, and it's because the Jayhawks are playing 4 guards when he's on the floor. He's also offering a spacing option from 3. So while guys like Udoka Azubuike might not have the space inside to work, the same goes for David McCormick and Silvio De Sousa. When the Jayhawks go 4 guard, they put the shooters on the floor, they're going to have that space to operate inside, even if those guys aren't taking 3-point shots, because the defenders are still going to be guarding them out to the perimeter. The big thing for Udoka Azubuike, especially in that championship game, he was magnificent. 29 points against Dayton, was that he just had the chance to work inside. How many times did you see a KU guard drive into the paint, and maybe there would be some help defense or rotation, but they could just dump it off to the big man and let him score. Oh, and by the way, I think Devon Dotson had a career-best 31 points too. The 1-2 punch worked. Again, I go back to Isaiah Moss, though, and say what's different. KU can now play 4 guards, even without Jalen Wilson, because it has a bunch of guards that Bill Self feels good about.
Boom. That was 2 minutes of solid info from that guy on KU basketball. That was awesome.
Well, thank you.
That was just that was amazing. Now we're going to step out of bounds.
What a nice comment.
I know. Carter Stanley is done at Kansas. In case it's Skylar Thompson has one more season to go. Let's try to look into the future at how these 2 quarterbacks will be remembered by their football programs and the fan base. Scott, start with the ever-persistent Carter Stanley.
Well, look, if there's anyone who knows what it means to start at quarterback at Kansas, it is Carter Stanley, given that, he's a guy that over his time at Kansas was in the competition to start and then pushed back and behind multiple guys and having the chance to leave and still sticking around for his senior year. As he went through his season, he started every game, which I think bringing stability to the position was important. He had that 3rd quarter against Oklahoma State where he was pulled for Manny Miles, and I think it didn't sit right with him. I think it was a controversial decision. He didn't say as much because he's not a guy who complained, but you could tell that it took a toll on him, and for him in the season finale, in his KU career finale, after his 3rd interception, to go up to the coaches and say, hey, I've had my time. This game is now out of reach. You should give Manny Miles, a graduate transfer senior, you should give him one more chance to get in there and play, close out this game, knowing that Les Miles is the coach. I thought it was a selfless act from a quarterback who, look, Carter Stanley ended his KU career with 5,000 passing yards, 2nd all-time in touchdowns. He had some positive marks on the field. He obviously quarterbacked that win over Texas, not an especially well quarterback game, but still still, he was the quarterback in that win. So, look, Carter Stanley's had some good performances, but I think he'll be remembered for how he went about his business. Very professional, very workmanlike, and it showed.
I stop and wonder what a kid like this would have done in a more stable program with more consistent coaching and a first coach that really believed in what you did.
Yeah.
But it's the fate he had. Skylar Thompson's an interesting story for Kansas State. It really is fascinating. He is a very solid quarterback, but he's not spectacular. He's kind of turning into a very good manager. He had 2 turnovers to start the second half that a really good defensive effort by K-State kind of bailed him out of those with an interception and also a fumble. But he just kind of rises up and makes plays, and he knows how to rally his team. Next season, of course, he's got 1 more year, will be very big in terms of how he will be remembered. And the bar at Kansas State is set extremely high with Michael Bishop and Colin Klein to start with, but there's so many other great quarterbacks. Jonathan Beasley, El Roberson, you just keep going. Jake Waters was very proficient in his time in Manhattan. I think Skylar's going to be in that second tier if Kansas State has another big season next year. He just makes plays, he just persists, and he's really matured into a great leader for the Wildcats. Really nice young man, too. Really nice young man.
And it's funny, you mentioned tiers. Obviously at Kansas, tier 1 is just like Todd Reesing, and then you kind of move on from there. But no, I think both quarterbacks have done a lot to endear themselves to their respective fan bases, especially this year.
Well, Todd Reesing proves you find the right guy, he can pick up the whole team.
Yeah, and fist pump a lot.
Yeah, he did. Now let's hear from the fans, and our fan question this week is:
K-State basketball lost 2 games at a bad tournament in Fort Myers. How broken are these Wildcats? And that's from Tad in Rossville.
Man, I tell you what, that was dreadful what happened in Fort Myers. They lost a game to Pitt that they should have won because they were, 3 of 13 from the free throw line? By the way, that's really bad. And then they turned around and just really fell apart against Bradley. That didn't play well in its opening game against Northwestern, and then really kind of unleashed on Kansas State. This K-State team is kind of a mismatched parts thing we're going on right now. The upperclassmen aren't playing well. Cardiajada seems ill-equipped to be the floor leader, and they might need to look elsewhere. But the good news is the freshmen are solid. Montavious Murphy's out with an injury right now. They need to get him back. That played a big role in their performance. But I'm telling you what, stay the course. It may not be this season, but this freshman group is going to be the core of something pretty good at K-State.
Kansas team losing to Bradley. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it didn't work out well for K-State.
Well, remember to ask us your questions on our Facebook page and on Twitter at The Drive 13. And when we return, we will look at our predictions here on The Drive.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.
Welcome back as we head down the home stretch of this week's show. Now it's time to take a look at our predictions. The predictions are brought to you by Vanderbilt's, your work boot center. And remember to make your weekly predictions over at thedriveshow.com. And let's look at last week's results. It was a big weekend for Team Me. I managed to go 3-0. The fans went 2-1 as you guys are slowly pulling away from the two talking monkeys on the set. Scott went 1-2. And remember, make your picks over thedriveshow.com. Let's look at this week's picks. And we start with Utah -6 versus Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. I'm just going to go with the Utes.
I'll take Oregon. I can't envision Utah playing in the college football playoffs, so they need to lose.
Every time I call them the Utes, it makes me think of Joe Pesci. Anyhow.
Next is LSU, a 5.5-point favorite against Georgia.
Does this seem low to you? I think LSU is a lot better team.
I do as well.
I'm going to take the Tigers.
I will agree with you on LSU Island.
Our last game of the week is the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma is a 9.5-point favorite over Baylor. Will Oklahoma beat the Bears by 10 or more? I think the Bears went out right.
You know what? I kind of do too. I'll go different than you. I will take Oklahoma, but begrudgingly, because I think there's a good chance Baylor wins outright too.
Shocker. Again, make your picks over at thedriveshow.com. And now it's time for our On the Clock segment. And On the Clock is sponsored by Carpet One. Buy local for a strong local community. And we start off with Scott Chasen.
Well, look, a lot of seniors for KU football on senior day. It'll be this way for the next two classes where they're actually losing more seniors than players that they're bringing into the program. And don't really have time to obviously go through and mention every one of them, but some of the guys, Hakeem Adeniji, Bryce Tornaden, Mike Lee definitely left their mark on the program. Mike Lee, hard hitter, fun to watch safety. Bryce Tornaden, a guy who wasn't the fastest, didn't have all the physical tools, but really made his way into being a pretty nice Big 12 player. Hakeem Adeniji headed to the Senior Bowl, and he'll have a chance to play in the NFL, especially if he moves inside on the offensive line. So a lot of great seniors, Dalen Charlotte obviously in that group too, and they certainly left their mark on this program.
Well, it's not easy when you're going into your senior year and you get a new coach, but K-State seniors had to do that, and they embraced the change, and it paid off for the Wildcats. It's a great group of guys. Just pulling some out of my head. Kansas kids like Denzel Goolsby, Trey Deshawn, Scott Franz from Lawrence. A great group of guys that laid a foundation for future success under Chris Kleiman, and boy, does the future look bright at Kansas State for football. And that's it for this week's edition of The Drive. We will see you next week right here and all week on social media.
Matt Ryan?
Did you know the NFL playoffs on CBS stream live on Paramount Plus?
I just want a frozen fudge bar.
Bet you didn't know Super Bowl 58 was in Vegas this year.
What about a Sunday?
Super Bowl Sunday on CBS streams live on Paramount Plus.
Seriously?
Would an NFL MVP lie?
Former MVP. Can we at least get a selfie?
Of course.
I got your NFL playoffs on CBS and Super Bowl 58 streaming live on Paramount Plus.